Okay. Wonderful, we're live. Folks are coming in, hello. And welcome to today's webinar, Giving Tuesday, a global action plan for fundraising success. Thank you for joining us. My name is Maryna Tkachenko. I'm the Development and Communications Manager at Myriad USA. We will begin shortly, but just before we do, some housekeeping. Please note that this webinar is recorded and we will share the recording with all the participants as well as any resources mentioned throughout the event. Participants are in listen-only mode and the chat function is also closed. But we invite and encourage you to submit your comments and also questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to answer them live, but also have allocated a Q&A section towards the end of the webinar, where we'll be sure to address many of your questions. This webinar is part of our series on sharing best practices in fundraising, which is designed to help nonprofit professionals worldwide enhance their fundraising practices. Just for those of you who are not familiar yet with Myriad USA, please allow me to just give a brief word on what we do. We used to be called the King But One Foundation United States, and we changed our name to Myriad USA earlier this year. And we facilitate giving across borders. So Myriad USA provides US donors with a simple and efficient platform to support nonprofit initiatives overseas, anywhere across the globe. But we also partner with foreign nonprofits, such as yourself probably, and offer them cost-effective solutions to receive tax-deductible gifts from donors in the United States through a service called American Friends Funds. Note that Myriad USA is a member of Myriad, the Alliance for Borderless Giving. We have sister organizations based in Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. So if you have donors in any of these countries or regions, we can help you as well. And if you wish to learn more, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@myriadusa.org. And that email will also, as you see, it's in the chat as well. So feel free to contact us. Now, at this time, I am finally delighted and truly excited to hand it over to our panelists. So each of them, Amy, Anita, and Mihika, they will directly tell us who they are, their background, their work at Giving Tuesday, but also Mihika will set the stage for today's panel discussion and give us more background on the movement. So please, I'm handing it over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. And then thank you for the amazing introduction, Maryna. So just dive right in. My name is Iniekung, and I work as the Programs and Partnerships Manager for the Africa Hub at Giving Tuesday. It's my pleasure to be part of this webinar to really speak to aspects of fundraising, generosity, and how really everyone who is joining and everyone who has access to the webinar recording afterward will be able to kind of up their game and hopefully up their Giving Tuesday campaigns this year. Over to you, Anita.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Anita Gallagher. I'm Programs and Strategy Consultant for the Latin America and Caribbean Hub in Giving Tuesday. And I am actually the most recent member of the team. I just joined. I used to be the Giving Tuesday country leader from Mexico. So it's really exciting to be able to translate those national level opportunities and think about strategically across Latin America and the Caribbean as a whole. And I actually come from a background working in fundraising, strategic communications for the nonprofit sector. So that's been a wonderful way to pull in all of the experience. And the thing that I love most about Giving Tuesday is the data. And it's really exciting to be able to take all of the data work, understand what's happening, what's working, and to put that into practice and translate that into really usable tips for nonprofits on the ground. Mihika, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Myriad, for having all three of us here. I'm Mihika. I support the growth of the Giving Tuesday movement in India as the India Partnerships Consultant. So I work with various networks and different kinds of organizations to see how, how we can support them in growing the Giving Tuesday movement. I've been in the development sector or in the nonprofit sector my whole career, but one that I feel is especially connected to what we're talking about today is I worked as a field traveler for Global Giving, which is another crowdfunding platform that some of you might know about. And essentially my job was to work with small and large nonprofits in India and then in Nepal and support them in engaging crowdfunding and fundraising on Global Giving. So I feel like I'm going to draw on, of course, our experience at Giving Tuesday, but also some of my experiences at Global Giving. As Maryna mentioned, I'm just going to take 5 minutes, hopefully, to share a little bit about the Giving Tuesday movement and really share with all of you how the movement has grown over the past decade. So this might be information that some of you know already. This might be information that is repetitive. But it's great for us to get a sort of common understanding and get a sense of what's happening with the Giving Tuesday movement over the past 12 years. Hopefully it'll answer some of your questions or add more questions, and we'd be really happy to take those in the Q&A function. And Maryna and all of us will get to it later. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Yes, okay, great. So I'm going to share a little bit about the growth of the Giving Tuesday movement. This might seem familiar, but the Giving Tuesday movement started in 2012 as a simple hashtag experiment. Of course, many of you know that around the Thanksgiving holiday in the US, there are 2 days that come before and after, which is Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And those are days of people buying things from what we can see and consuming. And the people who started Giving Tuesday tried to go back really to the sort of community-centered, values around Thanksgiving, which is bringing communities together, and thought, what if we have a day to give? And that's how Giving Tuesday was born. It falls on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving every year. So from these origins, from one day and from one hashtag, over the past 12 years, it's grown into one of the world's largest generosity movements. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's happened and what we've learned from that. So the Giving Tuesday movement is in over 100 countries around the world, with millions of people celebrating and embracing generosity as a core part of their community. And really on the Giving Tuesday, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, this year on the 3rd of December, but also throughout the year, millions of people come together and champion a very simple idea, that everyone everywhere has something to give and every act of generosity counts. So it's really thinking about generosity in a broader, more holistic form. You can celebrate generosity by giving time, by giving talent or a skill that you might have, by giving testimony or advocating for a cause or giving voice to a cause, by giving ties, by facilitating connections or bringing people together in generosity, or by giving things, which include money and things like clothes or food items. So it's really thinking about generosity in a much broader way. And that's really what's helped the Giving Tuesday movement to grow around the world. The people who started Giving Tuesday and was incubated in a community center in New York called the 92nd Street Y, they did something quite extraordinary 12 years ago. They decided to give the idea away and to invite hundreds of people to co-own this idea and make it their own. And this they did because of a fundamental belief that the people who started Giving Tuesday would never be best placed to understand or respond to the challenges that communities face. That really there is no single solution to all of our many challenges, but hyper-local leaders, like I'm sure many of you are in this room, are best placed to bring your communities together to respond to these challenges. You are in fact closest to the problem and therefore the solution. But when all of us as community leaders and all of you come together and are bound by some values or belief in some values, that's when we form a network, an interconnected web through which systems change is possible. It's really this distributed power approach that has led to the growth of the Giving Tuesday movement. And now, all of these leaders, hundreds of leaders around the world, are bound by values that center around generosity. And it's really generosity that's the glue that brings this web together or this network together. But it's generosity as a function of reciprocity and mutuality. By that, I mean, it's not a function of a transaction between those who have to those who have not, but rather that championing the idea that everyone has something to give is really at the core of the movement and what makes it move. And while all of these leaders are connected by values around generosity, they also are responding in their own unique and innovative ways to the challenges of their communities. So they work autonomously and independently to shape the movement wherever they are and however they feel. They get to choose what the movement is called in their countries or in their communities, how it shows up, and how they want to respond. And that's really sparked some beautiful innovation and creativity in the Giving Tuesday movement. And that's also one of the big reasons why it's grown and become what it is today. All of you know this, and that's probably why many of you are here as well. It's a huge day for fundraising globally. These are only numbers from the US, which is significant in and of itself. It's also because we have the most robust data infrastructure and partnerships in the US at the moment. But $3.1 billion was raised on a single day last year on November 28th in the US alone. Now, this is just for me to, I mean, of course, all of you understand the potential of the movement, but think about all of the other countries and all of the other types of giving that is not being measured here. And it's really the creativity, innovation, and collective action of the hundreds of leaders and people in this movement that make up the movement. So while it's a huge day for fundraising, it's also a huge day to celebrate and champion generosity of all kinds. I want to spend just 2 minutes talking about something that's core to the Giving Tuesday movement, which is this idea of mission over brand. So there are all of these people who form part of the Giving Tuesday network and the community all over the world. How do they come together? And what does co-ownership actually mean and look like? So you can organize your Giving Tuesday movement in so many different ways, in ways that make most sense to you wherever you are. Maybe your community is a geographic area. We have community organizations like Panhandle Gives, like Give to Gahana, which are small local community organizations or community movements that celebrate the generosity of a city or a county. You can organize around a cause like Giving Zoo Day, where zoos across the US, instead of fundraising separately, they come together and fundraise as Giving Zoo Day. So they're really championing the cause over each organization. You can come together as a identity group, as a religious identity like Catholic Gives, or any other identity like a sexual or gender-based identity. You can also come together as a network of groups. Maybe there are a group of runners in your community who you want to bring together and organize around generosity, or merely as individuals. And everything has its own place in the movement. Unbranding. And it's really this approach to Giving Tuesday that there is no single brand that the Giving Tuesday movement is trying to champion. In fact, you can create the movement in whatever way makes sense to you. And that lends itself even to the logo, to what you call it, to when you celebrate it, to how it looks, and who gets involved. And all of these are the logos of the many country movements. So you can see that everyone has added their own little flair based on the flag of their country or the cause that they're representing, but also all on their own, not at Giving Tuesday's direction at all, have decided to maintain some form of interconnectedness, this heart, to show that they're part of a network, but in their own unique ways. And there are over 100 countries around the world. And in each community and country, it looks differently. So really, the growth of the Giving Tuesday movement is testament to these values of unbranding and co-ownership. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Giving Tuesday, the organization. So the movement started in 2012, whereas the organization, which is registered in the US, started in 2019. So very new. And it came as a response to the organic growth of the movement. The organization really exists in service of the movement. So it's not the organization that's thinking about how the movement moves. It's in fact all of you who are in this room and all around the world who are creating the movement in your unique ways. And the organization, which is supported by these 5 global hubs that MA, Anita, and I represent, that bring networks and collate learnings. And everything that we're going to share with you is based on one core principle, which is tools, not rules. We're not here to tell you how to run your movement and how to do whatever it is you're doing. You know best how to respond to the challenges in your community. All we're doing is bringing together our collective learnings from this network and from 12 years of the Giving Tuesday movement, from leaders, and sharing some resources that might be of use to you. So that's the spirit in which we're going to go into this panel. And hopefully that's given you some idea and context into what the Giving Tuesday movement is today. And yeah, I'm going to stop and hand it back to Maryna.
Great, thank you, Mihika. That background is really helpful. I'm sure there are many folks in the room who might be familiar and have done their campaigns, enjoyed the movements, but I know there might be quite a few of us who are new or who might have been hesitant and not sure what is Giving Tuesday all about. So thank you for that background. And let us jump into the panel discussion as well to get into the good questions we have. And just a reminder, folks, as we're talking, please feel free to submit your questions. You might have some particular questions to your experience as well that might be helpful for discussion. So Anita, I'm coming to you with the first question. Sort of a general, but let us begin with the basics. What are some of the key elements of a successful Giving Tuesday campaign? I know we're meeting now at the end of June. Seems like far away from December, but is it too early? Or how early should organizations start planning for Giving Tuesdays, excuse me? And last but not least, what is maybe a particular advice you could give to organizations who are planning their first campaign and might be hesitant and not sure where to begin?
Of course. Well, you know the rule, it's never too early. It's always time to get the ideas flowing. It's true that you might not want to go public on your campaign until a couple of weeks or months before the big day, but it's always a good time to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to connect with people on the day. After all these years of experience leading different campaigns, I think that the one big element is so important is having a clear goal, just having an objective. There's so many things that happen on Giving Tuesday. There's, as Mihika said, there's tools, not rules. And so the thing is, swim in those waters, find out everything that you could do, but try and pin it down to a specific objective, because that's much more manageable at an organizational level. So your objective shouldn't necessarily be the dollar amount that you want to fundraise. Think about your objectives in terms of connecting with people, changing people's attitudes, ideas, behaviors, and really making them celebrate generosity with you on the day. I think focusing your objective on people and not the money is one of the main things. And then if that is your objective, of course, what you need to think about is, well, what are my audience? What are these people? What are they interested in? How can I connect with them? How can I give them a really joyous giving experience? Again, the change in vocabulary is definite in our part. It's intentional. We don't necessarily talk about donations. We'll talk about giving experiences. And so if you can think about how to ask people to get involved in a way where they bring them whole selves to your cause, to this opportunity to work alongside with you, it shouldn't be just a transaction of, get out your credit card or send the money. It should be something that they can give, but also feel like they're expressing their values when they give. They're saying something about themselves. They're saying something about what they believe in. And as Mihika also said, they're doing it in a way that makes sense to them, with their local community values, experiences, and everything else. maybe a lot of theory. I wanted to give you a quick example of how that is in practice. I know an organization that works with children who suffer from cancer. They work with the children and their families. And they realized that they were having difficulty just going out and asking for these monetary donations. And they thought, well, what do we spend money on? How can we think about something else? And they realized that they were spending money every year buying bottles of a nutritional supplement, like a drink, but it gives the children nutrition as they're going through complicated procedures. And they were spending lots of money on this. So we said, well, instead of asking for money to pay for this cost, why don't we ask people to buy bottles of this supplement and give to us? And of course, that rings true with people on the ground, because they like to give something in kind. They like to buy something tangible and hand it over. And they didn't just stop there. They created a challenge. They said, right, for Giving Tuesday, we're going to map out our logo of our organization on the ground, and everybody that brings a bottle has to put it into this space. And little by little, we're going to complete the logo of the organization. And so day by day, they're posting the photographs on social media of how this logo is being built with all of these bottles. And they don't just stop there. They take a photograph of the families of the people that are coming as they're putting the bottles onto the logo. They're uploading that to social media. They're sending thank you messages, celebrating these people. And they're giving them a hug as they come through the doors. And they're saying, thank you for coming and building this with us. And you know what? It turned into such a success that they kept on getting these bottles of this supplement throughout the whole year. And it vanished as an expense from their budget. And that's worked over several years. They created this tradition. And so it just showed you, by just switching the focus a little bit and not thinking about the money, but thinking about the people and the experience, you can build a really robust campaign around Giving Tuesday that celebrates people and how they come together to solve a problem in common.
Oh, all right then. I would just also want to say just segueing from what Anita had shared, and really thinking about elements that could make a really successful campaign. I know for a fact, and this has been with speaking with leaders all across Africa, sometimes coming into a movement or beginning that fundraising campaign can seem like a gigantic task. But the reality is that, and how Giving Tuesday has functioned so far, is there's a uniqueness to Giving Tuesday that allows anyone anywhere to take a really small idea and basically co-opt it from themselves into a group that could lead into a wider movement, as we have seen with what the movement is currently. And so I would say really just start from where you are. The example that Anita has given is so amazing, and it really shows what I would say around being able to leverage technology, leverage goodwill. People want to give, people want to be able to give what they have intrinsically, right? And so it's really important that individuals who are here on this call, and those who might be looking at this as years go by, understand that everyone is a giver, and you just have to be able to identify what people feel is worthy of giving. An example that comes to mind that really speaks to us here is education. In Africa, education is a big deal. It's taking so many out of poverty. People really feel drawn to even giving towards the education of others. And this shows in surveys around giving, education usually comes up top 3 when it comes to individuals giving towards a cause. And so there's this hashtag called #WhenAlumniGive, and it's run by a coalition out of Kenya. And what they have been so successfully been able to do is leverage this cause, leverage the appeal that education has to people, and the fact that it's really easy to want to give back to your alma mater, except you had really bad experiences, guys. You do want to give back to the school that you attended, right? And then the idea of also giving back to those who are all still in the school that you might have attended is a really big one. And so using this, I can tell you for a fact that a school like Strathmore University, for example, was able to raise over 400K on Giving Tuesday alone, using that hashtag, being part of the coalition. And so it really gives to show that these are things that other organizations can begin to think about, right? And also, I know this is for the question that Maryna had shared around, how soon is it to begin to start thinking about Giving Tuesday? Every Tuesday, for example, is Giving Tuesday. So at Giving Tuesday, we have what we call the hashtag Giving Every Tuesday, right? And so I would encourage everyone who is listening or who is watching that there is a global movement of support when it comes to resourcing and generosity. You can leverage the hashtag Giving Every Tuesday, right? While giving isn't restricted to just one day of the week, it's an opportunity to amplify acts of generosity and giving alongside a whole global torrent. So I would say take the advantage, ride the social movements wave, and go about resourcing.
Thanks, Emmy. And excuse me, Mihika, if you would like to add on to the questions.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I completely agree with both Emmy and Anita. Just one small thing, which maybe is more like tactical, strategic thing you could do is, in the same vein as, you know, have a specific goal for your Giving Tuesday campaign. Make use of your the advice that I would give is make use of your network in creative ways. So maybe this is a practice that some of you do, network mapping, where you just sit down and literally map out who is in your network. If you don't do that, please do that. There are all of these resources available, and I can share some as well on how to map your network. But the unique addition to Giving Tuesday is network mapping, but with a holistic approach. Maybe there are some people in your network and you look at that person's name and you're like, you know what, I don't think that they have the finances right now, or they might not be responsive to financial asks. And then in a lot of fundraising campaigns, you remove them, like, or you don't ask them. But in a more holistic approach, you could ask them for other things. You could ask them for time. You could ask them for some talent they have, some things that they might have. Basically, expand the approach to your campaign. While fundraising might be your ultimate goal, don't leave out the people you think can't give funds. Include them and invite them in your campaign, and they're likely to stick with you and maybe get you more donors in the future, right? So think of ways to get people into your campaign. Anurag, who's a community leader in India, had a wonderful campaign last year that he called Strum a Smile. So he works with a organization called Manzil Mystics, and they really think about music education for young people from underprivileged backgrounds. So he started his campaign by saying, I want to fundraise for my organization. He started talking to us and thinking about how he can do that. So that was his ultimate goal. And he still retained that goal. But through conversations with Giving Tuesday, he decided, you know what, actually, maybe I will broaden my campaign and open it up so that people can give in many different ways. So some people can fundraise, some people can share a musical talent, some people can donate instruments that they have, some people can just sing for a neighbor and take a video of it and hashtag Strum a Smile. And so you find different ways for people to get invited and meet them where they are. And really, the campaign was much more successful and long-term in the same way that Anita's example was, when you included a more different ways for people to engage. So really, my advice would be make the most of your crowd. Don't restrict your crowd, but find different ways to engage them. And you will still reach your fundraising goal, that's to be sure, but you'll do it in a way that invites everyone along.
No, thank you. This is really great. And I think what I'm hearing really at the core of your answers is, one, moving away from that scarcity mindset, and then that we're competing with other causes, competing with other organizations and on Giving Tuesday or beyond. But that's not the point, actually, right? A coalition, a network of like-minded organizations, like-minded partners, supporters are really what, is more powerful at transforming whatever you're working towards. And last but not least, what you said really about sort of don't leaving out the people who might not just give money, but you might want to look at folks who can give you your time or expertise. It's really, at the end of the day, the volunteers and the people who believe in what you do and are engaged. At the end of the day, they either become your donors or can get you donors and financial support, which is nonetheless still obviously important. Okay, anyway, that's my little summary, but this is a great start. And now I'm just going to move on to Emmy, and I'll ask you the question of, now beyond sort of your first campaign, how can organizations stay ahead of the curve and also continuously get involved but improve their campaigns over the years. And maybe if you could also have an opportunity to speak to that point, that it's not just that one Tuesday after Thanksgiving. That's not the point, right? It's sort of a bigger thing going on there. So I'll let you.
I'm happy to, Maryna. I'm very happy to. So I think what I would say firstly as a response to that would be to ensure that organizations, individuals, whoever, is looking to run better campaigns, whoever is looking to stay ahead of the curve, continues to engage and communicate, right? And this means mainly continuing to engage with your volunteers and partners, really everyone who might have come together to help you or be with you, possibly at your during or at your first campaign, right? And even if they hadn't come together with you at that time, maybe everyone who you would have envisioned, right, being part of a campaign with you, not just on Giving Tuesday, like we are saying right now, but even the weeks leading up to it, the months leading up to it, Giving every Tuesday, for example, being able to loop in and consistently build volunteering partnerships and collaborations, being able to build these relationships into your organization's annual outreaches, for example, into your organization's programs, into your organization's communications, right? If you have things like within your corporate comms, if you have like newsletters, for example, if you have events that you think you could always segue, you could always have a portion of maybe an online webinar that speaks to Giving Tuesday, like Myriad is doing today, right? Way before Giving Tuesday, the day itself, that could really work to place you ahead of the curve, as opposed to just waiting for Giving Tuesday, the day itself, to come and then begin to rally around that time. I would also say, as an offshoot of this, as organizations try to maintain a database of connections, of networks, of individuals, of resources, of people that, so this can help you identify champions and ambassadors, and also, find ways to integrate your own community into your campaigns. People, organizations, they love to be part of innovation. They love to be kept abreast. They love to engage. And if you're able to ensure that you have this wholesome database internally, and you continue to reach out to them, in whatever ways you can. I know that certain organizations usually might have manpower issues. They might have issues, that are known to all of us in social dev work, but sometimes it's just being intentional about ensuring that relationships are maintained way before Giving Tuesday, so there is no run around. And then lastly, I would say as an organization, it's really important to foster a culture of storytelling using technology as much as you can. Social media, digital marketing, this might seem like buzzwords, but they were buzzwords a couple of years ago. Now these are things that you really have to begin to ensure that you're using as little as having just one social media platform, because Giving Tuesday did start as a hashtag. The majority of success stories are from online, being able to just really leverage online platforms, leverage communities that some people have never met each other, but they are able to give across borders. Giving is done, giving of time, all forms of giving are done online. And these are things that nonprofits, schools, individuals, kids, even, with Giving Tuesday Spark are able to do. Stories create narratives, and you should be able to ensure that the narratives that are created are ones that grow your campaign. So share compelling impact stories using audio, using visuals, infographics and photos to both encourage and inspire your community, to inspire your volunteers, inspire partners and collaborators. And it's over to colleagues to add their own sense.
Shall I can go and then I'll hand it over to Anita. So MA is talking a lot about, how to communicate with your donors, storytelling, and something she said, which reminded me of a data-driven approach. And by that, I mean, I don't mean, big spreadsheets and things like that. What I mean really is think about measurement for your campaign. And measurement in data is really a useful tool for year-on-year success, right? So how do you know what you want to do next year if you haven't really measured or documented what you've done this year? Having a goal using a network map, having your database, your communications. These are all ways to document. Another way that we often use within the Giving Tuesday organization is an AAR. I'll write it in the chat, but it's an after action review. So essentially, every time you do something, it could even be an AAR after this webinar, where you have some colleagues who come to this webinar and you sit and you're like, cool, what did we learn from this? Everything you do, whether small or large, can be thought about as an AAR. So after you finish an action, let's do a review of it. And the few questions that you ask yourself, or that we often ask ourselves, is what did you expect? What did you want to happen? What actually happened? So just measuring from what you wanted, what really the reality of the situation, what went well and why, what didn't go so well and why, and what did we learn? And just answering these 5 questions in a simple format, even if you write them down with your team, is a great way to think about next year. Because next year, maybe the same people are not in your team. Maybe you've forgotten what you did for Giving Tuesday. Maybe you have so much other stuff going on that, you've not really thought about this. But documenting it and keeping it somewhere ensures that next year, when you pick up your planning for Giving Tuesday, you actually have something to start with. You have your review of what you've done, and you can build on that. So that's my one other tip for year on year success. Anita?
I love that idea. You stole the words from my mouth about, my love of data. But building on that, I think the one thing that we should always be doing on Giving Tuesday and any other thing is innovating, but not innovating with that wild creativity of, oh, light bulb moment, I have a radical new idea, let's try something. Innovating based on our knowledge, innovating based on, well, what did we learn from last year? What worked well? Maybe having a hypothesis. Our hypothesis is we have a database of 200 people who haven't given to us in the last 2 years. So if we communicate them in such and such a way, or we give them such and such an ask, maybe we can get half of them to give again. So, coming up with a hypothesis, but then thinking, how can we do something new? How can we try something out? Because when you merge the innovation with what Mihika is saying about learning and using tracking to work out what's worked and what's not, you'll really get the best of both worlds, because you can try something new. Giving Tuesday is one day in the year. You're talking about a short-term campaign. But if you do that after action review, after you've innovated, after you've done something different, you can say, did it work? What did we learn? And that's what keeps your campaigns growing year on year.
No, this is great. Thank you. And I think a lot of folks sometimes maybe underestimate as well. And obviously there's the bandwidth and having enough staff to do this, and sort of priorities of measuring that, having that data, and then using it to sort of go forward and see what you learn. So hopefully this is also a reminder how important that is. And as to go back to the very beginning when Mihika gave us an overview of the billions of dollars, but also what she mentioned, what's not measured, right? And hopefully sort of one day we can see that as well, because it's really impactful. And I'll just mention that, and we'll share that as well. But Giving Tuesday itself on the website has wonderful resources, including about social media and storytelling and logos and branding and toolkits and all kinds of helpful stuff, and not just for nonprofits, but also on the individual side, on the small business side, and what corporations they can really dive deep into and see what's helpful for you. So we'll share that as well. But now I'll just jump into the last question of the last but not least, but really important question of the panel discussion, and we'll also take time for the Q&A. So folks, don't forget to submit your questions in the Q&A box. But Mihika, I'll let you take the lead on this question, and will also hear from everyone else, because this is quite an interesting question. We have a quite global audience in the room. As I mentioned in the beginning, Myriad USA works with foreign nonprofits across the globe, and many of them are also in work on various causes, from health to education to arts to science, you name it. There's really no one typical organization in the room. So to that, how do sort of the cultural differences influence your approach, not only to fundraising, but also to community engagement, which is really what I'm hearing from the discussion is at the heart of sort of cultivating and unleashing the power of radical generosity on Giving Tuesday in different parts of the world. Are there any, from your experience, from your hubs, but just overall, any region-specific strategies or tools that have proven to be particularly effective? Share some insights because also, we can learn from our peers on the region, wherever you are, but also from organizations in other regions, because there must be some sort of creative ways and commonality that you might share. So please tell us.
Thank you so much for your question. And I want to start by saying it's really the beauty in the localization of this movement. That's what makes it grow and what makes it successful. It's that this movement looks different, not just in a regional context or in even a country context, even like in a neighborhood context, it can look different, from one neighborhood to another. And that's really the something to be celebrated and brought to light in the Giving Tuesday movement. So when I'm speaking, I am in no way speaking like from India, because all of the regions that we represent, are very large, but I do get the spirit of your question. And I wanted to share that Giving Tuesday is really not as big in India as it is in many other parts of the world, especially not as big as in the US. So it's very new. Not many people know of it. But that also is a great opportunity, right, to grow the Giving Tuesday movement and really show the essence of generosity in India. So basically, Indians are extremely generous, but the way that generosity is expressed is a little bit different. It's a lot of informal giving that happens in India. A recent study or recent report showed that over 90% of the generosity or the giving donations in India happen informally. And by informally, I mean, by families to different kinds of like in non-traditional organizations, religious giving to various religious institutions. So that kind of giving is not really tracked. But it definitely shows how generous Indian people are. And really the opportunity that nonprofits have is to think about creative ways to maybe, given that Indians are so generous, how do we direct some of that generosity towards nonprofits as well? And one of the things, and it's not really a proven strategy in India, it's a proven strategy in different parts of the world, as I mentioned, is mission over brand. And it's really something that we're trying to work on in India, which is how can Indian organizations come together, form collectives, form coalitions where they think about generosity to the cause as opposed to the individual nonprofit. So break the cycle of competition and, grabbing what seems to be limited resources, but generosity is not limited, it is abundant. So how can we tap into that spirit, into the abundant spirit of generosity? And that's really something that we're trying to think about and support nonprofits in doing. The other thing that's specific to, it's not really specific to the Indian region, I've heard from different parts of the world as well, but Indians do not like to talk about generosity. You do an act of kindness and it's part of it's a very individual thing. It's part of your connection with your spirituality or, with yourself. It's not something you want to share or publicize or talk about it with anyone. And that it goes contrary, actually, to what the Giving Tuesday movement has seen around the world, where talking more about generosity actually inspires generosity. So that's really a cultural shift that the Giving Tuesday movement, hopefully, in coming to India and growing in India, might be able to facilitate, which is this idea that generosity is generative. It creates itself. So the more I recognize myself as a generous person, and everyone around me is generous, and talk about all of the generosity that I receive and give, the more people around me are likely to do the same. So those are my two sort of, I don't think I answered your question directly. They're not like advice, but I think when noticing a lot of things that the Giving Tuesday movement can offer to India and the different ways that Indian nonprofits can make use of the Giving Tuesday movement and its values to grow generosity. I'll hand to Anita.
Wonderful. Yeah, resonate a lot with a lot of the things you said. It's the same is true in Latin America, and I think that many countries here we feel like we have an inferiority complex when it comes to giving, because we see the numbers and we see all the data coming out of other regions, and we think, oh goodness, we're not that. And exactly like you said, Mihika, it's just how we're measuring giving. And people in Latin America are incredibly generous too. Maybe Maryna, if you let me, I'll put into the chat, or you can share out a link to one of the studies that Giving Tuesday has done on the differences between formal and informal giving. And, I had an inkling, but when I saw that data and I saw Brazil and Mexico, and I think also India and Kenya come up as being incredibly generous, measured in rigorous data studies, it changes our understanding. And so instead of, as the nonprofit sectors in Latin America, bemoaning the fact that, oh, people don't give, we don't have a culture of giving, I think we just need to turn that on its head. I think we need to say we need to celebrate the giving that we do, and we need to find ways to encourage more people to give in new ways and to nonprofits, because if people are giving informally in their community, to friends and family, to social clubs, to sports clubs, they're giving to their children's schools, that's wonderful. We need to celebrate that, and also find ways to get them to give online, to charity, to give those tax-deductible donations, to find new, more formal ways to give as well. And I think in Latin America, that often comes down to trust. Trust, unfortunately, is something that's eroding all throughout the world, not just Latin America. But it's certainly true that we need to overcome that. And I think the best way to overcome that is involving more people. If people don't trust in institutions, we know that they trust other people. In fact, another reference is Edelman, a big global organization or company that does studies every year on trust. But what consistently comes out is that people say they trust people like me. We trust people who work with them. They trust people who live in their local community. So the takeaway from all of this is, if you think that trust is an issue, that people don't know your organization, or they might have a reason because they don't know it not to trust it, have other people spread the word for you. It connects in with storytelling. It connects in with empowering people in our community. It connects in with the network mapping of people who can give you their voice, their time, their talent. Have them come on board, run a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, have them tell stories about why they give to your organization, what they love about your organization, give them the confidence and the tools to go out to other people and ask them to give to your organization on your behalf. And by engaging those peer-to-peer networks, what you're really doing is you're building trust, and you're making up for that deficit of public trust, shall we say.
I love what Maryna just said, guys, because it's really true. And even just listening to Mihika, right? Well, and I do see a pattern here, because we are all global majority regions, now that I think about it, but it is quite true. There are nuances. I'm speaking as an African, as a Nigerian. I do know that giving in Africa is really intrinsic to our commonalities. It's really embedded in the way that we do informal things, is embedded. And while there are nuances, of course, language across the continent, right? I'm from Anglophone speaking Africa. There are, my country, Nigeria, is entirely bordered by French speaking countries. There are nuances around religion, around politics and socioeconomics, right? But still, there is a common trait of generosity that is seen across African communities and traditions. And this is something that Giving Tuesday and Trust Africa, for example, have been looking at in a recent project, the Africa Giving Traditions project. I'm going to put in a link in the chat shortly once I'm done speaking, guys. But and in that project, we have been looking at different African traditions and just intrinsic generosity that is embedded in these traditions across different countries. And it really just brings to mind how much like Anita had said, not a lot of data has come out of Africa, particularly, right? So people don't, you'll be hard pressed to stop on like the average Nigerian on the road and say, oh, who do you think philanthropists are? And they would be quick to say, okay, maybe they would call the 3 richest people, right, that they know. But the reality, and what we are also trying to say on this call, is that everyone is a giver. Everyone has something to give. Everyone has given at some point in their life. But if we are able to find avenues, right, that where we feel our giving counts. If people, for example, in the pandemic, right, there was such opportunity to give. and for the giving that was done to be recognized, right? So we had, for example, people come together to food banks, donations. I gave so much. I know family members, I know friends who gave so much more than they feel they had ever given in their lives. But the reality is that we had always been giving. We give religiously. There are lots of faith-based organizations, here in Nigeria, we are very religious people that give. And fun fact, according to the World Giving Index, where African countries rank like top, on the list of countries that give. And this just really shows how community focused we are, how community driven, even our cultural practices that are ingrained with giving are. And so what I've seen from, being part of Giving Tuesday in Africa. So currently Giving Tuesday is present in about 24 African countries. And what I have seen just working with African leaders within this country is that a lot of really successful campaigns have been successful because leaders and those who have driven them have been able to emphasize community ownership. They've been able to emphasize that these are problems that are known within communities. For example, just going back, to the alumni giving, for example, it's community driven, it's community led, it's alumni of the schools that they attended saying, we see our school, we see what the school needs, we are giving towards the school, right? It's being able to ingrain and say, and this is not some organization coming to come and lead and say, oh, give us your money, we're going to do this. People are seeing where their money is going. People are seeing that they can give 100 shillings, 200 shillings, right? And it will go somewhere. There are those who might give thousands upon thousands of shillings, but even the little shillings that are being brought out have a purpose. People feel empowered in doing this. And I think for me, and I hear this even as Mihika speaks, even as Anita speaks as well, right? For me and for everyone who is listening in and who, I see a lot of questions coming out, right, around this as well, who might be thinking about fundraising and within their particular localities or regions, is really to also find, that coalition. There is power in community, there's power in coalitions, right? Find that coalition, find your community, find, the hard problems, right? And then be able to say, okay, these are the ways that we think. Your thoughts matter. The ideas that you have, they are solid, they matter, they work, they will work, right? And while we may be thinking at top level, oh, how do we engage with donors? I can assure you that donors are also thinking about and also looking out for community-led initiatives like yours. And there would always be, support for campaigns that come out when they are actually community-driven. Over to you, Maryna.
No, this is great. I hope everyone's taking notes, but also you'll be able to watch the recording. But this is really great, not just tips, but truly ideas that you should keep in mind as you're working on your campaigns, right? I'm hearing from Mihika that generosity is infectious, that the good infectious disease that you want to give to others, right? When people see you give, and I know, I'm Eastern European, and a lot of the times it's kind of that there is shame. If I just give $5, I'm not going to say because it's not enough. That's right. But no, well, actually, all of that comes together, and going back to that idea of trust and what makes a philanthropist, and sort of reimagining that idea as well as you think about engaging your supporters. And Anita, I think you skillfully sort of connected us back to that storytelling and peer-to-peer support, and Emmy as well. Having somebody who trusts you, who's worked with you, who knows you, to also speak for you, and going back to those volunteers and the people around you and represent you, and really, again, goes back to that community-driven giving, and it's not an isolated fact. That's why we're all here together in this and brainstorming and working with your teams. It's not an isolated, one person with lots of money who's coming in. It's truly a different transformative idea. So on that note, we have just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we give us a chance to answer some questions. So the first one I see, Mihika, you answered it in the chat, but if you want to just say out loud as well for a few words about network mapping, what it is, and give us people some background on how they can kind of look at it.
Yeah, so I have answered it in the chat, but basically network mapping, it's a tool that you can use based on whatever your goal is, right? So you've set out a goal for your campaign, and based on your goal, you can create a network, or alternatively, you can just sit today and create your network, and then find a goal that fits within your network. So it's really a resource that you can use based on however makes sense to you. And it's really, and there are many ways to do this. It's not, it's not my idea. There are many ways to do this, and there are many resources online. But the way that I like to think about it is in 3 concentric circles. So let's say you are in the middle, and then the circle closest to you is your primary network. It's people that you can directly connect with, that you know how to connect with, and you know who they are. Then your secondary circle is the people that your primary circle are connected with, right? So I know Anita, but I don't know Anita's friends. So Anita's friends would be my secondary circle, right? And that's a way for me to grow my network. Instead of asking Anita maybe for money, what I can ask her to do is, hey, can you share my fundraising campaign with your friends? That's a way to get more donors through your secondary circle. And your tertiary circle is an interesting one, where you realize that maybe to really move the needle on your cause, or there are some people in your community, let's say it's a local government official, you have no direct connection with that local government official, and you don't know anyone who does either. But you know that they're important for your cause, and you want them to be in your network. So try to think about engaging your primary and secondary networks to be able to reach your tertiary network. But don't start with your tertiary network. And a lot of people make this mistake. They go to people who they think are powerful, or people who they think can give more, right? You go to like large donors, you don't have a clear connection with them. And that's where you might trip up. Think of ways to build to that tertiary network through your primary and secondary instead of going to them directly. Do either of you want to add something? Okay, great.
No, this is great. This is helpful background. Thank you. I'll just move on. I'll be brief, but Emmy, there's a question that might be helpful for you to address as an example as well, from an anonymous attendee. In South Africa, we have annual International Nelson Mandela Day, July 18. I'm wondering how we could use the spirit of that Mandela Day, whose impetus may be dwindling since COVID-19, to launch the spirit of a Giving Tuesday for our university. So maybe the question is sort of also generally leveraging those international, national days for your campaign.
And that's something we're really passionate about at the Africa Hub. So nice that you just brought it up, because some hours ago, I was on the call, like I was on a webinar with Giving Tuesday South Africa. They had this webinar as a precursor to Nelson Mandela Day, fun facts. So whoever wrote that, I'm very happy to make a connection with Giving Tuesday South Africa. And I'm sure Snare, who is our country lead, will be happy to speak with you and put you through, if I'm open to doing that. Because it's something that we really, like I said, we really know there is great power in being able to draw observance days to campaigns. That's something lots of country leaders, lots of Africa, movement ambassadors have done over time, and I think would also work for you as well, particularly around, academia.
No, yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think we have time for 2 more questions, but maybe on the brief side as well. One is, what are some of the best practices regarding social media use for the campaign, particularly for those organizations that may not have a large online presence yet? Maybe I would just say it's not too late to begin the online presence and see in the ways that you can expand it. Obviously, again, bandwidth and all that. But if you have any thoughts around social media and being online.
It's hard to do nowadays because the space of digital social media is always changing. But I always think it's important to get the balance right between what you're publishing on your main platforms and how you're following up with people. because social media nowadays is a way to understand what's happening, but so few people actually take action on the basis of what they see on social media. So you can think about spreading the word and getting the message out on social media, but you always have to flip over the coin and do one-on-one follow-up. Now you can do the one-on-one follow-up on social media too. You could be using the messaging platforms, you know, on the same thing, or you could actually just send personalized emails or pick up the phone for some people. But I think that we have to understand that nowadays, social media on its own is not enough, but it can be part of that strategy.
I also wanted to add, and I've put this in the chat very quickly, but again, I'm not an expert in social media, but I think sort of keeping it authentic and real is the best way to go. There's so much like trending stuff and stuff about, you know, I don't know, there's just this whole narrative around social media and how it's changing the way we communicate and think about communities. But something that MA says for me runs true in social media as well. Center your community, center the people, their true stories in a tasteful and authentic way. And I think that's the thing that connects with people. A lot of us are looking through a lot of fake things on social media, and maybe a way to stand out now is to just be as real as you can.
No, those are some great tips. And again, we'll share some other resources as well. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I'm sorry we couldn't take all of your questions, but feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and also connect with the hubs and see how you can get in touch for additional support. But thank you everyone for joining us live today. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up email with the recording and the additional resources. We also value your feedback, and we invite you to take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey and the link in the chat. Your insights will help us improve and shape the future sessions. And I'm sure the panelists would want to hear your thoughts and sort of what they can add in the future and all that good stuff. And last but not least, before I let you go, please join us live for our next webinar in the series on September 4th. We're taking a little summer break, but we'll be back in September. The webinar will be on engaging women for philanthropic support. We have a great panel of experts who will translate the research on how women give into practical tips and strategies you can use to grow your support for women philanthropists. And hopefully this will be a good addition and you'll gain helpful tips that you can indeed as well use for your Giving Tuesday campaigns. So thank you, Anita, thank you, Emmy, and thank you, Mihika. It's been such a great pleasure. Truly appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you. So, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.